to be doing, I mean, everybody's probably doing some version of this once a week, sort of manually in Excel, and I can show you how to not have to do that in Excel too. But, you know, doing it on once a month, and your board should be looking at this report. Let me rephrase that. Many organizations don't bother with this because they don't think it's important, mostly because they don't know how to read it. But I think you'll find that once you learn how to read it, it will open your eyes to a lot of things that maybe aren't going so well, or maybe are going better than you expected, right? Okay, and then the last thing we want to do is we want to compare our actual results to budget. And so now we've come around full circle, haven't we? We planned, we had development, we talked about revenues, we've got our operations, we've done some financial reports, we're going to do some budget variance analysis, and then we can figure out what to do next. So any organization, I don't care if it's your family or your nonprofit, you know, or your General Motors, and obviously they didn't do much of this. Okay, you need to be looking at your budget and see how you're doing, so that, you know, is the sales budget being met? Is your money coming in? Is your development budget being met? Is your spending under control? Is it being spent in the right place? Okay, so and you need to make these reports in enough detail so that people can actually make decisions based on the information. And again, if it's 2 or 3 months late, you might as well not bother, because everything's changed, right? So here's an example. And again, you have this in there. I think you actually had the original budget in your package, and then here's the little analysis. So here you can see that we have 2 columns. One is for whether or not, you know, here's the budget at $8,000 for audiovisual. The actual spending was $9,000, so they were over budget. Negative is bad, okay? So this is a spending budget, so they were over budget, okay? By $1,000. You might say, that's no big deal. It's only $1,000. It's a, you know, $900,000 organization, right? But 13% of the budget, okay? So when you're doing these comparisons, you need both dollars and percentages so that you can make some kind of a value judgment as to whether or not it's worth running down why, okay? What went wrong, okay? Down here, I have a 9% variance in office supplies. That bugs me a little bit. I have an 8% variance in my product purchases. I have a 3% variance in professional fees. Maybe I'm not so worried about that because that's all that in-kind stuff, so maybe it's not a big deal. But my goodness, I've got a $1,000 positive variance in telephone. That's a 20% good variance to the good. So I'm like, oh, okay. But you know, you definitely want to do all of this. So I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to skip through some of these slides because I want to get to this analysis. Okay. Here are some of the metrics that everybody looks at. Months cash on hand, liquidity. You've got some of these in the handouts, and you can have a look at that. What I want to show you is something important. These are the ones that Charity Navigator looks at, among others. Your administrative expense ratio, your fundraising expense ratio, and your program effectiveness ratio. Okay. So what I did is I went through and I calculated all of these for our little mythical organization. And there's actually a spreadsheet in your package that shows you where these came from. And this is how I calculated them. So they've only got 1 month's cash on hand. I'm not real happy with that. Okay. They're pretty liquid otherwise, but it certainly depends on if those pledges come in. Unrestricted net assets are 19% of an annual operating expense budget. That's probably not as high as I'd like to see it. Okay. They're spending 63% on program. Okay, everybody okay with that? That sounds pretty good, right? Fundraising efficiency, they're making $5.68 for every dollar they spend. Okay. And then here's those ratios again. Administrative expense from the GAAP financial statements, 15.5%. 21.6% fundraising, 62.9% program effectiveness. Okay, so can't tell you if those are good or bad because we have to compare them to other organizations in the same space, and in order to make that decision. So it just kind of is what it is. But this is calculated based on their GAAP financials. The problem is Charity Navigator and those kind of people don't use the GAAP financials. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like if you calculate the same organization off the 990. Okay. So you see what happens to the numbers. And so, you know, when you're telling your story with your financial statements, Sometimes you really do need to give more information than the minimum, so that when you can have a conversation with a funder, you go to the Parker Foundation and say, you guys are spending an awful lot on admin. You can go, I'm not really, okay? Because my 990 doesn't reflect the economic value of all of those all of those professional services that I'm leveraging, okay? And so you show them your gap financials and everything else. Not only are they impressed as all get out that you understand this stuff, okay, but they're actually going to understand your organization better, and they're going to hopefully help you leverage those professional services into the community even more. Everybody does something different, and that doesn't apply to everybody, but it's, I think, a pretty good example. This is trend analysis. I'm going to let you guys look at this for yourself. This is what happens to your percentages as you grow. In year 3, we had an executive director, so you can see we dropped from 70 to 59 in program, and then we ended up going back up. This is a graph. All this is in your materials that shows you kind of how things work. There's something here that talks about how to work with the rating agencies. Again, you can look at this yourself, and I've given you links to the various places. Charity Navigator will, quote, adjust their star ranking for your unique circumstances. Now, most of you probably aren't being ranked by Charity Navigator. They only rank 5,300 out of 1.1 million. But, you know, it's something to be kind of thinking about and know about. GuideStar, everybody's on GuideStar. Okay? If you have a 990, you are on GuideStar because they get them from the IRS and they stick them up there. So GuideStar has something kind of cool. You can upload your annual report, your gap financial statements, and a bunch of other stuff, including all kinds of information about your organization. So when small donors are going out to GuideStar to learn whether or not they want to give you money, guess what? You can tell them exactly what you think they need to know. Don't let them rely on your 990. The 990 is what the IRS wants to know, okay? And I think I made the point these are not the same thing. So use GuideStar intelligently to tell your story, because online is where it's going. Online is the future. And we really need to be out there and involved in that particular conversation, and you might as well be controlling the news cycle, okay? So there's a little more there. This is a little table that you can look at. We've got some resources for you. SVPI has an organizational capacity assessment tool that we can talk about. You can get that from Peggy. We've got a financial capacity checklist, which was, I think, sent out to you guys in email, and there's some here if you didn't get one. We have resource teams. This is the resource team that I run. This is what we do. And I have a very wonderful group of partners that works with me on this resource team. We have expertise in a lot of these areas, and we're happy to talk to people over the phone and take requests for assistance. We have a process that you have to go through, but I think we're more than happy to talk to you. A couple of folks here have taken advantage of that, and I think that they must have benefited from it because they're here today learning more. And then the last 2 pages of your handouts are all of these resources that I promised you, and I encourage you to take the time to sort of drill through this stuff. Accounting software package review. Idealware.org is also the organization where Ray's download was, where he talked that talks about the donor management software. So the trick is finding 2 that'll talk to each other, okay? And I really encourage you to be thinking down as you move down your road with your organization, thinking in that. And then obviously we've got training, we've got UCSD Extension, Nonprofit Management Solutions, USD, SDSVP, lots and lots of training resources in town that you can take advantage of. Get familiar with that. I would like to thank you very much for your attention and for taking your Saturday afternoon